Hello and welcome to our game on this Monday morning here. Loads has happened over the weekend. We're going to have Fintan O'Toole and Paul Fitzpatrick on chatting to us later on. But I suppose before we get into any of the results, and so much has happened, what's going on in terms of like the players' expenses at the moment? And we saw Tom Parsons last night on the Sunday game, Stephen, and he's basically talking about the arrears that players, like, I mean, I don't think anyone who's any interest in sort of GAA and players and what have you would have any issue with the players getting their expenses brought up to date. I think that absolutely should be done as quickly as possible. You know that there was a surplus for the GPA last year or the GA after the two previous years of the GA very much struggling and been down an awful lot of money. But in terms of the conversation where it's at, like, should this talk be about ensuring that it's all about expenses going to players, or should part of this conversation be about ensuring that, well, maybe meeting up 3 times a week or 4 times a week if you include a match is enough? Where do you stand on all of this, Stephen? Because you've been involved with Carlow, you've been involved at Roscommon, you're involved at club level, you see what it's like.
Yeah, look, players make a huge commitment, Shane. I think probably there's a wee bit of both. You know, how many nights do you actually need to meet up? And I know the situation's actually funny. Carlow and Roscommon, my own experience, like their situations were quite similar in that they had a lot of players based in Dublin, Shane. So they would have had to make the journey down to Carlow, you know, twice a week. Now, Turlock was very good in that, you know, he sort of wanted them to do remote sort of S&C sessions in Dublin when they can. But we would have had them down on a Tuesday, Thursday, and then obviously the weekend as well. Anthony was very, very similar in Roscommon, you know, the S&C side of things, you know, trusting the players, the Dublin-based players to do their own stuff, like a huge amount of players coming across from Dublin. Like I did the journey for a year, obviously, and, you know, it's a long track for a player to travel over, get out of the car, train hard, get back in the car and maybe get back to Dublin 11, half 11, 12 o'clock that night, you know, and it's a huge commitment. And the other thing we've got to consider too, Shane, like, for example, there just even last year, like there's, like, even take Big Enda, for example, Big Enda Smith, Big Enda was studying to be a teacher, you know, so he's still at university, so he's not in a full-time employment, you know, obviously money wouldn't just be growing on trees for these lads, like, you know, and it's the same in Carlow as well. We had a lot of students in UCD and DCU down in UCC as well, and, you know, they're travelling back. It's a massive commitment for a student, like huge amount of money, like, and I have a student teacher in my own school myself at the minute, like on placement on Mondays and Tuesdays, like, and, you know yourself, the struggles that they have. We've all been students, we've all been there, you know, and it is and inter-county football now, lads, to be honest with you, is littered with young lads like students, you know, and it's become nearly a young man's game. Like there's very, very few players now playing well into their 30s, as we know, because of the commitment level. So it's a wee bit of both. You know, there's massive, you know, massive asks on players now from management teams. I find it, Shane, I think less is more. I've always said that. I think less is more. And, like, you know, you look now at what the Joneses are doing. Everybody's looking at what the Joneses are. They're training 6 nights a week. We need to train 7. You know, they're training twice a day. We need to train 3 times a day. You know, and it's all this. And again, it comes down to probably the group of players you have. Like, can you trust the players? And if you can't trust the players to do their own S&C, to do their own little bit of conditioning away from the group sessions, because your time is limited. When you have the group together, for me, your time with the group should be focused on the footballing matters. You know, it shouldn't be focused on the conditioning matters. I always say that club players, even, you know, come back to pre-season, you know, fit to play football. Don't come back trying to get fit to play football. You know, come back fit to play the football, and that takes a bit of individual responsibility from the players too to do that. But listen, I think what COVID has taught us certainly is that Zooms are now a big part of things, so we can do video analysis on Zooms. We would have done an awful lot of that with the Rossi lads. Like, you know, we would have had a lot of Zoom calls on a Tuesday night with video work, and players would have presented. No, it's not the same. It's not personal, and, you know, you don't have the same sort of, you know, buzz or whatever when you're meeting as a group and things like that. But, you know, it probably has taught us that, you know, we don't need to be together 6-7 times a week, you know, and I think some of the demands placed on players, Shane, is quite scary. Like, but I did chuckle last night with a hint of irony, like when I heard Colin O'Rourke giving out about it, like, and you've got to remember too as well that there's people making a large amount of coin sitting in those studios on the back of these amateur players, you know. So we've got to be sort of thinking of that as well in that respect. Like, so look, it's a debate that's going to rage on, of course. Like, but listen, the other thing, Shane, I said to the wife the other day, like, geez, I'm glad I'm not traveling down the country now. £2 for a litre of diesel or whatever it is, like, you know. So, like, it's gonna. I think it's gonna have implications for a lot of people, you know.
Yeah, I think you've definitely got a very strong point on that. I'll give a bit more background. I suppose, obviously, the expenses were lowered a nice bit during COVID there, which the players absolutely accepted. And the charters the players' charters to be sorted at the moment. And there was talk of 50 cents per mile, and then after talks broke down, it seems the GAA, the talk is that they're talking about 65 cents per mile for 4 collective gatherings per week, 3 training sessions at a game, with anything beyond that to be subject to local bargaining. Now, one of the big things that Tom Parsons was saying, you know, head of the GPA, is that players don't want to pay to play, which I think pretty much everyone would agree with. They do a huge service, and obviously there's the flip side whereby they get the enjoyment of it, the health benefits, stuff that Colin O'Rourke was saying too. So obviously he had a couple of valid points at the same time, but I can understand where you're coming from at the same time. But he did say that the GPA is looking for, it's basically talking about unlimited expenses. And is this a move towards semi-professionalism? And even look at the amount of money that the top brass in the GPA made in 2019, collectively 450,000 for the key personnel, as it was called. And overall, 10 full-time staff in 2019 earning 742,000 euros. So there's that in as well. And also, like the ESRI report a few years ago talked about players spending up to 31 hours per week. So, Fintan, in light of all of that, should the talk be just about all expenses should be covered no matter how many training sessions are done, or should they be banding together and trying to find ways to limit the amount of sessions, or certainly the amount of sessions where you have to travel across the country? Because, like, surely you'll do 1 or 2 gym sessions at the year where players need to be shown certain techniques and all that kind of stuff, which I get. But after that, surely do your sessions, you know, at your own leisure. And also, like any meetings we'll do over Zoom, so there's no expenses for that.
Yeah, I'm probably coming down on the side of the cap on the sessions and as regards to the travel. I think they're the kind of main issues that have been kind of thrown into focus by this. You know, like if you look at the schedule the way it is now, let's say like there was a round of football league games at the weekend. There's a round next weekend of football in Ireland. There's football in Ireland the following week. League final the start of April. Then we have only 1 week break between then and championship. So, I mean, you'd wonder how many training sessions are teams actually going to be fitting in. I mean, given how hectic the schedule is going to be, is it kind of not a more kind of a recovery base at this stage? And I mean, I suppose the debate is kind of between the GPA and the GPA, or it's been framed as that. But ultimately, a lot of it, I would think, was going to come down to, in terms of the capping, it's county boards enforcing it and it's managers. And I think it's quite a difficult situation for players, especially this time of year. A lot of kind of young guys, I suppose, are kind of getting games in leagues, guys trying to break into squads. You know, if a manager tells them to train 5 times a week, very difficult for them to say no if you're trying to make your way and try and get a place on an established squad, because let's face it, they'll probably find, top counties will probably find some guys who will be able to do that and kind of will be willing to do that. So I think that's one of the kind of difficulties. And there is the, like Stephen alluded to, like there is the person next door syndrome about it, like as in, you know, okay, we're a Division 2 or Division 3 county, you know, how are we going to get better? It's like, well, we got to do 6 days a week, you know, it's just a natural way. We've seen that kind of through the GA. So I think it should be capped, to be honest, but trying to enforce that, I think, would be very, very difficult. I mean, you go back to the GA's efforts to try and get the training ban, for example, you know, that no county will go back between certain dates. And we all know anecdotal evidence over the last decade whether that's been kind of flouted. You know, even like 12 months ago in COVID times, you know, that was obviously a big thing with kind of teams training. So I know that's maybe a separate kind of a thing that has kind of sparked this, but it is obviously linked to it. And I mean, like the cap of the training sessions, I didn't really interpret it the way O'Rourke did, that they're looking for unlimited training sessions. The way I was interpreting it was basically, if players have been asked to train 6 times a week, they should be covered for that. They're not looking, that was the way I was reading it anyway. They're not looking to be training 6 times a week at this time of year. But obviously, in some cases, there is, for various reasons, demands for them to be done it. But like the point Stephen makes in terms of the travel, like, is very, very relevant at the moment. Like, I mean, it's more and more like with the cost of it and with the guy and the fact that we're going back to now, you know, I think most third level institutions that it's gone back to actually being on campus education. So it's not like, you know, for a good bit of during COVID when guys were doing lectures at home and were able to, you know, maybe move back to their home counties and it wasn't as much of a trip for training and all that. But I mean, I think we're definitely getting into that situation now where, you know, different parts of Dublin, Cork, Limerick, Galway, guys have big commutes kind of coming back for training sessions, you know. So it's a big issue. And where it goes from here, I mean, if it starts impacting on game schedules, I mean, that's one thing the GA don't want, because I mean, like, one consequence of this change in the season, they don't have much time to play around with. So like, if they were to lose, not say it's going to happen, but if they were to lose some games out this weekend, it's hard to know where they're going to be able to fit them in.
Yeah,
Shane, on that, Shane, if I could just make a point there, Fintan says there, you know, you talk about the travel, like I I obviously was in a privileged position, having employment, and you were coaching. So, like, you got your expenses. We all know that coaches, managers, you get your expenses. Physios get their expenses. Everybody, players should be no different, okay? But I was fortunate because, say, for example, you mightn't have got your expenses for 5 or 6 weeks from a county board, because county boards are historically slow at removing funds. And you could have been out, honestly, the guts of close to £1,000, travel, just on travel and expenses and maybe food and things like that as well on the journey. So you're lucky enough if you're in employment that you can afford that. The money is going to be replaced with your expenses. But if you're a student, lads, like, that is a very, very difficult thing a very difficult fight to fill. And I know historically from days of Carlo, like Daniel St. Ledger was the GPA rep in the county and did a lot of work for GPA and stuff. And Daniel would have put huge pressure on the Carlo County Board, because there would have been times when players weren't paid for weeks and weeks and weeks, and lads were starting to feel the pinch, man, and what Fintan said there is completely true. Like, now, above more than ever, with the price and the cost of fuel, it's unless we're going to supply them all with electric cars, I don't know what the way forward is.
Yeah. Well, look, I was just looking at plenty of tweets last night, and as ever, this topic exercised a lot of people, and some people talking about, saying that Tom Parsons is saying that, players should get paid for 5 to 6 training sessions per week, and obviously that is the expenses. And look, that's what we're talking about here. I see Brian Flannery, former Waterford hurler, saying, nonsense from GPA. If the intercounty players are so united, why can't they just agree that no panel of players will participate in more than 4 collective sessions per week? Simple, really. A question I'd have for you then, Stephen, is, how many times a week does a team need to meet collectively, realistically? I mean, surely 3 collective sessions and maybe plus a game. 3 to 4 is enough. Everything else, it can be done in solo.
Yeah, you see, the problem you have too, Shane, is that you're accommodating all these management teams now that have got so big. Backroom teams are bigger than playing teams in some respects. You've got your S&C men; they want their stage. You've got your nutritionists, you've got your coaches, your forwards coach and your goalkeeping coaches, and you have all these different types of coaches, your video analysis and your stats man, and they all, it's nearly as a manager, you're nearly managing 2 teams. You're nearly managing a backroom team and a playing staff. So, but I do feel, lads, less is more. I really do. And I do feel that things can be beneficial. Like, for example, I don't know why a lot more counties don't do it. Like, so for example, there, like, I know a county here close to myself here, like, that would have been using bank holiday weekends locally to do, like, nearly, little mini training camps, but it would be done at home. It wouldn't be going away down the country or something like that. Then, teams can do a lot more of that, and they can pack a lot in. Because I know our time, like when we would have went to Johnson House pre-COVID, we would have stayed for one night, but we got so much work done Saturday, so much work done Saturday evening. The boys might have had a couple of beers on the Saturday evening as well, from a cohesion point of view. Then Sunday we worked hard again, and then we're away home after our dinner on Sunday, and you're away for a couple of days, whatever. But the work that you got done in those two days was monumental. It was worth 2 to 3 weeks training, Shane. But this is the point I make, and this is where I think a lot of counties are losing the run of it. When you have the players collectively, the time should be spent coaching. The time should be spent coaching. It's as simple as that. We're spending too much time worrying about conditioning levels and S&C coaches and the likes of that. Start coaching your teams, and I can see it. And, like, watched a lot of football over the last few weeks, and you can see the teams at the highest level. Yes, they're physically conditioned and fantastic condition, but they're really, really well coached. And there's a lot of really good work being done on the training ground. I think sometimes your Division 3, Division 4, you can make massive gains with good coaching. As simple as that. Good coaching can make massive gains in those divisions. And you can see management teams that are well organised. The likes of Enda McGinley there in Antrim, you can see the job he's doing. Like, I don't think Antrim are any fitter than Laois or Westmeath or Limerick or London or any of these teams, like, but they're well organised and they're well drilled, and they've got a plan. They've got a management team who are setting them up in the right way. They're playing football. They've got a direction. They've got a clear plan, a clear focus. And I think sometimes we lose traction of what is actually most fundamentally important, and that is coaching the team how to play the game. And that's like.
Is 3 sessions enough per week plus a game? I mean, should really the focus be on making sure that this doesn't happen? And obviously, I would say the best way to do this is through the GPA, where there's a system for players to anonymously report with the GPA or whoever that our county board, our manager is trying to make us do 5 sessions per week here, and we're not going to get paid the expenses for it. That might be the way to clamp down.
I don't know what do you need? What do you do in 5 sessions a week? Like, what do you do? It's madness. Like, it really is madness. Like, and it's got the stage. And I said this, Shane, in your show before last year. I felt that I was involved in it. Like, I think the intercounty game started to become a runaway train, and you're sort of looking at it, going to yourself, like, where does it end? Like, where does this end? Like, It just, is going to be 7 days a week, full commitment. You know, players aren't allowed to associate with their club mates. They're not allowed to do anything outside of the county. You know, you've now got counties on their nights off. Players have been forced to do Pilates sessions. That's happening here, you know, and you're just going to yourself, give the lads a couple of nights off, because at the end of the day, less is definitely more. And like, if you're meeting 2 nights a week, like, Shane, we had a great year with the Carlow lads, a great year in 2018, and we actually did very, very little. Like, we would have met Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday, you know, and the best year in 100 years. Like, you know, it's like, it wasn't more training 5-6 days a week, and they were in good shape. You know, mature group of players you trusted to do their S&C work. Lads in Dublin do their gym session, logging in with the S&C coach, whatever it happens to be, job done. You know, he's got to remember these players have lives too. Like, and it just can't be completely absorbed and consumed with 5 or 6 days of absolute, you know, regiment that you need to be there, because there has to be a breaking point somewhere, you know. So yeah, you know, the cap on the sessions maybe isn't a bad idea, you know. But listen, the other thing too, and you look at it, like the legacy that some management teams are leaving as well. You know, as regards injuries, like, there's one county there in the last couple of years, I think there was 12 hip operations or something like that. Now, don't quote me, I'm only throwing that's a throwaway comment, but there was something I read somewhere where, you know, the volume of training these lads were doing, there was an obscure amount of surgeries that were needed when the management team walked away, you know.
Yeah, Ace Ollie 180 says 3 sessions is more than enough to be training. Coleman Long says it's 2022, not 1970. Everything and everyone must evolve. Bodybuilding won't make you better. What about club player who doesn't get a brass end? Well, there are clubs out there who actually do more commitment than certain inter-county teams, maybe at the very, very lower end of the scale. Probably not in football, but maybe more so in hurling. There are some kind of inter-county hurling teams that are probably operating at pretty low level, and they are getting grants. And when people say, you know, club players are putting in the commitment, there are a certain amount of club players who are putting in the commitment of inter-county players to some degree. Fintan, over the weekend, you were in Tralee, and Jack O'Connor did speak to the media, but a number of the inter-county managers withdrew with media cooperation and solidarity. James Horan, Fergal Logan, and Brian Dooher, Desi Farrell, Glenn Ryan, Kieran McGeeney, Declan Bonner. So it was just Jack O'Connor and Seamus McEnany who spoke to the media. Do you see, like, there's...
Porrick Joyce was another one. Did you see his quote? He said he never had much time for it. I'm not sure of the phrasing, but he said it was something that never had concerned him. So he spoke after the Clare game, right? Which was interesting.
So do you see, like, there's talk of a bit of an escalation here? Do you see an escalation happening? Do you see, like, in terms of, like, obviously the GPA would love everyone to be aligned on this issue, but do you see a sense of some people will cooperate and others won't, a bit like back when Cork and Kilkenny, you know, the socks up and the shirts out back in the day?
Yeah, well, I think there's definitely a sense of a split there, Annie, already with what we've seen at the weekend, you know. I was in Tralee, as you said, like, we spoke to Jack O'Connor afterwards. He was asked about the fact that James Moore, he said the first I heard about it was just coming up the stairs there from the Kerry PRO. I mean, the word had filtered through to us just before the game, about half an hour before throw-in. But from his point of view, he was out on the pitch at that stage, the team were warming up, so I presume it wasn't something he was aware of. But I don't think you're going to get widespread solidarity across the board that every manager is going to kind of adhere to this. As regards the effect it has, ultimately, from a media point of view, in terms of kind of, you know, print online, I don't really think there's a major impact. I suppose it is the broadcast partners that have actually done deals, you know, like RT obviously would have wanted to have James Horan on the sideline. TG Carey yesterday had 3 games, you know, they wanted to have the man of the match interviews afterwards and the managerial interviews. So maybe that's the impact, and maybe that's what we're going to kind of hear over the next couple of weeks. But as regards escalation, I mean, I suppose there is it hasn't been said concrete at the moment, but I've seen a kind of report, or hasn't been stated in a concrete fashion, but it has been kind of hinted at, you know, the possibility of, I suppose, games not taking place, and that's the big escalation. I mean, that's where you really start getting the impact. You know, we're now in a situation, crowds are back at games where people weren't anymore. There's huge interest there at the moment. The Football League in particular, I think over the next couple of weeks is really going to consume people's attentions, because there's so much at stake, and it's really going to shape the seasons. And the fact that you've only a couple of weeks then between the league and the championship, I think there's a great kind of a buzz there, and it kind of naturally feeds into each other. But if you're looking forward to those games and suddenly those games are gone, then that's when if there is a couple of games gone, I mean, that's the kind of nightmare scenario for the GAA that they really don't want to avoid for several reasons. But probably this year to be surprised if it comes to that. But it definitely, from kind of maybe a slow burning issue on Thursday or Friday, it kind of caught fire a bit over the weekend, didn't it? In terms of kind of in the spotlight, and obviously it's kind of the main thing that, like, you know, we're talking about now after the weekend's action, you know.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm just going to speed read through a thread from journalist Kevin Egan. I think he's touched on a lot of good points here. And I might throw it to you finally then, Stephen, before we move on, maybe talk a little bit about both of your counties, Down and Cork. But Kevin Egan goes, if there's an agreement to pay player expenses at a certain rate, it should get paid. Arrears are not acceptable under any circumstances. 2, if players are asked to go to collective sessions at a specific location, mileage should be paid. If you're only going to pay for 3 sessions, then players should not be asked to do more than 3 sessions. 4, however, some reasonable amount of pooling cars is a fair request. The point is the players should not be out of pocket. It should not be an income stream. Number 5, players need to be aware that the GAA don't pay players' expenses. County boards do, and county boards draw their income largely from within their own counties and from GAA members in that county. This money does not come from TV rights or corporate sponsors. 6, training sessions cost very different amounts in different counties. The mileage payment needed to assemble the Donegal, Roscommon or Leitrim senior football panel is very different to the mileage needed to assemble Dublin or Kildare. The GAA does not centralise this cost. 7, for obvious socio-economic reasons, there is a negative correlation between the wealth of a county and the cost of running training sessions in that county. So if there's an arms race in terms of the volume of collective training, then some counties cannot compete. 8, this is why the GAA needs to take this opportunity to hammer down on excessive training, make it clear that more than 3 collective meets a week are not allowed, and put hard punishment in place for verifiable breaches. This is a real chance to reinforce amateur status. Number 9, an ethos of faster, higher, stronger does not improve the entertainment value of our games. It only serves to make it more elitist, to freeze out more professions, to burn more resources to no good end. There will never be a better chance to push back against that ideology. And number 10, agree a deal with the GPA that confirms how expenses must be paid in a timely manner, that no county will ask players to travel more than 3 times a week, and then make that deal public. GA members deserve this, and if it's fair, GPA won't mind the public seeing the details. Any thoughts on the back of that, Stephen, before we finish up? Anything else we haven't said?
There's a lot of info to take in there, but no, listen, look, I think I read something, Shane, a couple of years ago. Leitrim were talking. There was a RTE were doing a sort of a fly on the wall thing over at Leitrim Centre of Excellence, and I think the average cost of an inter-county training session, one training session, was something like €3,500. Is that right? Is that correct?
I've heard that sort of figure before. Yeah.
So if you're thinking of that, that's 10k a week, man. That's 10k a week to run a 3 nights a week training, for an inter-county team, and over the course of 30 weeks, that's 300 grand. It's a lot of money, huge amount of money. So, it is. Look, it's something that the debate will run on and it'll roll on. And what Fintan there is rightly said as well. I would hope that it doesn't get to the stage where we're losing games, because the football is getting so exciting right now, and there's just so much at stake in every division, both top and bottom.
Yeah, so a couple of comments coming in here. Philip O'Brien, just look at how far the game has come on the last 10 years, solely down to hard work and training. If you want to win, you'll work harder than everyone else.